There are many misconceptions about Post-Stalin USSR. We will analyze and debunk them all. In this series, we will discuss many topics, such as state of the whole people, peaceful coexistence, the post-Stalin USSR economy, the fall of the USSR, and many more topics. So if you are interested in post-Stalin USSR, be it as a leftist or just as a curious person in general, just lay back and enjoy my video. Debunking Misconceptions about Post-Stalin USSR, Episode 2, Peaceful Coexistence. Mao and Hoxha accused post-Stalin USSR of becoming dogs of imperialism who stopped caring about spreading revolution and started advocating for reformism and peaceful cooperation. And they accused post-Stalin USSR of revising Lenin's and Stalin's peaceful coexistence. Is all this true? No. In fact, peaceful coexistence as it was in post-Stalin USSR was Stalin's idea. So anyway, let's see how Stalin created the idea of peaceful coexistence.
But before we look at how Stalin invented peaceful coexistence as it was in post-Stalin USSR, let us first examine what peaceful coexistence is. It's respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty, mutual non-aggression, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, equality and mutual benefit, peaceful coexistence between the socialist and capitalist systems, and cooperation between the socialist world and the capitalist world. Peaceful coexistence is also about not invading countries, but the peoples of their own countries and their own nations making their own revolutions and decisions, and about foreign powers not interfering and not intervening in these revolutions. This is an important part for self-determination, though in some cases it's okay if socialist foreign powers intervene. We will discuss that later. Also, I want to address one last thing. Peaceful coexistence between the socialist and capitalist system is necessary, especially in the nuclear world. Like, let's say the USSR is back now, right? It can't attack the USA, it can't attack a nuclear power because we would all die then, okay? Anyway, let's start reading Stone on peaceful coexistence now. There is no reason to doubt that in the future the Soviet Union will be true to its policy, the policy of peace and security, the policy of the equality and friendship of the peoples. Joseph Stalin, Order of the Day to the Red Army, May 1st, 1946. These aggressive forces, control the reactionary governments and direct them, but at the same time, they are afraid of their peoples who do not want the new war and stand for the new maintenance for the maintenance of peace. Therefore, they are trying to use the reactionary governments in order to enmich their peoples with lies, to deceive them, and to depict the new war as defensive and the peaceful policy of the peace-loving countries as aggressive. They are trying to deceive their peoples in order to impose on them their aggressive plans and to draw them into a war. Precisely for this reason, they are afraid of the campaign in defense of peace, fearing that it can expose the aggressive intentions of the reactionary governments. Precisely for this reason, they turned down the proposal of the Soviet Union for the conclusion of a peace pact, for the reduction of armaments, for banning the atomic weapon, fearing that the adoption of these proposals would undermine the aggressive measures of the reactionary governments and make the armaments rates unnecessary. What will be the end of the struggle between the aggressive and the peace-loving forces? Peace will be preserved and consolidated if the peoples will take the cause of preserving peace into their own hands and will defend it to the end. War may become inevitable if the warmongers succeed in entangling the masses of the people in lies and deceiving them and drawing them into a new world war. That is why the wide campaign for the maintenance of peace as a means of exposing the criminal machinations of the warmongers is now of a first state importance. As for the Soviet Union, it will continue in the future as well firmly to pursue the policy of averting war and maintaining peace. Joseph Stalin interview with correspondent of Pravda, February 16th, 1951. Basically, what Stalin says here is that war should stop and that war should be avoided. He wants peace, and peace between the capitalist world and the socialist world, and wants to avoid an arms race. Some said before that these quotes are when the USSR was still recovering from World War II, so they aren't legitimate. But that's not an argument, as one of the quotes that I showed you right now is from 1951. The USSR recovered in around 1949, as we saw with stuff such as building its own atomic bomb, which shocked the whole world, because the world didn't think that the USSR would recover this fast. Whether this means that the USSR opposes revolution or not will be answered later. Okay, did Stalin ever talk about peaceful coexistence as a term? And did he talk about peaceful cooperation between the capitalist world and the socialist world? The answer is yes. Let's read him for that. Peaceful coexistence between capitalism and communism is completely possible, and that the existence of mutual willingness to cooperate and the readiness to fulfill one's own obligations, while respecting the principle of equality and non-interference in the internal affairs of other states. Joseph Stalin answers to questions from a group of editors of American newspapers, 2nd of April 1952. As we can see, Stalin here supports peaceful coexistence, right? And he also talks about how on the peaceful coexistence it's necessary for the capitalist countries to respect self-determination, and that the United States of America and other capitalist countries should not interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. And he says that the same applies to the Soviet Union, and he supports cooperation between the capitalist world and the socialist world. Let's read a quote by Stalin on that as well. One more, okay? Alexander Verv asks, do you believe that with the further progress of the Soviet Union towards communism, the possibilities of peaceful cooperation with the outside world will not decrease as far as the Soviet Union is concerned? Is communism in one country possible? Stalin answers, I do not doubt that the possibilities of peaceful cooperation, far from decreasing, may even grow. Communism in one country is perfectly possible, especially in a country like the Soviet Union. My source for this is the interview with Alexander Verv, September 24th, 1946. Well, everyone I think knows about Nikita Khrushchev's communism by 1980 thing, you know? This thing, like, so communism in one country was actually Stalin's idea, not Khrushchev's. Okay, Khrushchev just continued the policy of wanting communism in one country. Okay, anyway, and this is really interesting. However, they did not reject internationalism. We'll talk about that later, okay? But first, I want to show you a few more quotes by Stalin on cooperation between the capitalist world and the socialist world. The US and USSR systems are different, but we didn't wage war against each other, and the USSR does not propose to. If during the war they could cooperate, why can't they today in peace given the wish to cooperate? Joseph Stalin interview with Harold Stassen, April 9th, 1947. Let us not mutually criticize our systems. Everyone has the right to follow the system he wants to maintain. Which one is better will be said by history. We should respect the systems chosen by the people, and whether the system is good or bad is the business of the American people. To cooperate, one does not need the same systems. One should respect the other system when approved by the people. Only on this basis can we secure cooperation. Only if we criticize, it will lead us too far. As for Marx and Engels, they were unable to foresee what will happen 40 years after their death. But we should adhere to mutual respect of people. Some call the Soviet system totalitarian. Our people call the American system monopoly capitalism. If we start calling each other names with the words monopolist and totalitarian, it will lead to no cooperation. We must start the historical fact that there are two systems approved by the people. Only on that basis is cooperation possible. If we distract each other with criticism, that is propaganda. Joseph Stalin interview with Harold Stassen, April 9th, 1947. Stassen asks, do you look forward in the future to a greater exchange of ideas and news, of students and teachers, of artists, of tourists? If there is cooperation, Stalin replies with, this will happen inevitably if cooperation is established, for an exchange of goods will lead to an exchange of people. The source for this is interview with Harold Stassen, April 9th, 1947. To summarize these three quotes, Stalin always wanted to cooperate with the capitalist world and the United States. How? By doing business, trade, exchanging goods, not criticizing each other's systems, and by not changing each other's systems as the USSR changing or overthrowing the American capital system would violate the principle of self-determination, so the American people had to change it themselves. In fact, Khrushchev also talks about this. Like I said, Khrushchev just continued Stalin's peaceful coexistence. Let's read Khrushchev to see how he defined peaceful coexistence and how he emphasized good relations between the USSR and the United States. To strengthen the cause of peace in the entire world, it will be of great importance to establish strong, friendly relations between the two major powers of the world, the Soviet Union and the United States of America. We believe that if the basis of relations between the USSR and the USA was based on the known 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, it would be truly a remarkable value for all of humanity, and it will certainly be healthy to the people of America, no less than the peoples of the Soviet Union and all other nations. The principles are mutual respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty, non-aggression, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, equality and mutual benefit, peaceful coexistence and economic cooperation are now shared and supported by 24 states. Nikita Khrushchev, the 20th Congress of the CPSU. Now, doesn't this sound very familiar? In 1954, the Chinese government initiated the celebrated 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. They are mutual respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty, mutual non-aggression, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, equality and mutual benefit, and peaceful coexistence. Together with other Asian and African countries, we formulated the 10 principles on the basis of the 5 principles at the Bandung Conference of 1955. Mao Zedong commented on the open letter of the Central Committee of the CPSU. Mao, even in his false critique of Khrushchev's peaceful coexistence, had the same definition as Khrushchev and Brezhnev on peaceful coexistence. Now, I want to move on to the topic of social imperialism, but before that I first want to mention that Mao and Hoxha revised Lenin's definition of social imperialism, that being a self-proclaimed socialist, who in reality is a capitalist imperialist. Basically, he said that it's socialism in words, but imperialism in deeds, okay? So, was the USSR imperialist, as in the monopoly stage of capitalism? To answer that question, we have to analyze whether they were capitalist or socialist after Stalin, which we will do in episodes 4 and 5. But in a nutshell, they were socialist, so they weren't imperialist. What was Eisenhower's definition of social imperialism? Attacking and invading countries, spreading revolution not for international socialism, but to extend one's own influence, and violating the principle of self-determination. Did Khrushchev and Brezhnev violate the principle of self-determination? No. Let's quote them for that. Liberation wars will continue to exist as long as imperialism exists, as long as colonialism exists. These are revolutionary wars. Such wars are not only admissible, but inevitable, since the colonialists do not grant independence voluntarily. If we recognize such wars, we help and will help the people striving for their independence. These uprisings must not be identified with wars among states, with local wars, since in these uprisings the people are fighting for the implementation of their right for self-determination, for independence, social and national development. Nikita Khrushchev, for new victories of the world communist movement. Some bourgeois leaders raise a howl over the solidarity of Soviet communists to Soviet people with the struggle of other peoples for freedom and progress. This is either naivety or a deliberate befuddling of minds. Detente and peaceful coexistence have to do with interstate relations. This means above all that conflicts between countries are not to be settled by war, by the use of or threat of force. Detente cannot abolish or alter the laws of the class struggle. No one should expect that detente will cause communists to reconcile themselves with capital's exploitation, or that monopolies will become revolutionists. On the other hand, strict observance of the principle of non-interference in the affairs of other states and respect for their independence and sovereignty is one of the essential conditions of detente. We make no secret of the fact that we see detente as the way to create more favorable conditions for peaceful socialist and communist construction. This only confirms that socialism and peace are indissoluble. As for the ultra-leftist assertion that peaceful coexistence is the next thing to helping capitalism and raising the socio-political status quo, our reply is this: every revolution is above all a natural result of the given society's internal development. Life itself has refuted the inventions about freezing of the status quo. Suffice it to recall the far-reaching revolutionary changes in the world in recent years. Leonid Brezhnev, the 25th Congress of the CPSU. As we can see, Khrushchev and Brezhnev really cared about the principle of self-determination and helped people liberate themselves from colonialist rule. Brezhnev also explains that detente is about non-interference in each other's internal affairs, and both explain that revolutions are a result of people writing their own history, and not other nations spreading revolution, and that spreading revolution is bad, and arming revolutionaries is bad, though there are some exceptions to this. Brezhnev also says that the USSR isn't becoming a dog of imperialism, and Khrushchev also says the same in the following quote. In advocating peaceful coexistence, we of course have no intention of saying that there are no contradictions between socialism and capitalism, that complete harmony can be established between them, or that it is possible to reconcile the communist and bourgeois ideologies. Such a viewpoint will be tantamount to retreating from Marxism-Leninism. The ideological differences are irreconcilable and will continue so. Nikita Khrushchev at Budapest Opera House, April 3rd, 1958. Let me show you now a few quotes by Khrushchev, which I will explain the meanings of later. I would like to stop at some of the fundamental questions of modern international development that determine not only the course of current events, but also the future prospects. These are questions about the peaceful coexistence of two systems, about the possibility of preventing wars in the present era, and about the forms of transition of various countries to socialism. Nikita Khrushchev, the 20th Congress of the CPSU. When we talk about that in the competition between the two systems, capitalism and socialism, wins the socialist system, then that does not mean at all that victory will be achieved through armed interference by the socialist countries in the internal affairs of the capitalist countries. Nikita Khrushchev, the 20th Congress of the CPSU. The stated provisions of the Marxist-Leninist theory completely overturned the notorious formulation of the question of exporting the revolution. It was Marxism, in contrast to all bourgeois ideological concepts, that proved that revolutions occur not by order, not because of the desires of individuals, but because of the natural course of the historical process. Of course, Lenin pointed out, there are people who think that a revolution can be born in a foreign country by order, by agreement. These people are either madmen or provocators. We know that they can't be made either by order or by agreement, that they grow when tens of millions of people come to the conclusion that they can't continue to live like this. And Nikita Khrushchev's source for that is Lenin's works, volume 27. Okay, so this quote is by Nikita Khrushchev from the 20th Congress of the CPSU. Khrushchev and Brezhnev, just like Stalin earlier in the video, said that they want to stop wars. Of course, the quotes that I just showed you were only by Khrushchev, but Brezhnev had the same policy on peaceful coexistence as Khrushchev, so keep that in mind, okay? Khrushchev, just like Stalin, as we showed earlier, opposes armed interference in other countries and their revolutions. This is a very important principle of self-determination, which Brezhnev also believes in. Khrushchev, just like Stalin, as we showed earlier, and just like Lenin, believes that the Soviet Union shouldn't export revolution, and that foreign revolutions and internal affairs of other nations should be the business of the other nations and not of the Soviet Union. This is also a very important principle of self-determination, which Brezhnev also believed in. Everything what I mentioned right now are very important parts of peaceful coexistence and always were since Lenin. In fact, Stalin also opposed arming revolutionaries of other countries. He wanted the USSR to disarm. So if it would have disarmed, it wouldn't be able to arm and help other revolutionaries. Kingsbury Smith asks, would the government of the USSR be prepared to join with the government of the United States of America in measures designed to implement this pact of peace, such as gradual disarmament? Stalin answers with, naturally, the government of the USSR could cooperate with the government of the United States of America in taking measures designed to implement this pact of peace and leading to gradual disarmament. The source for this is interview with Kingsbury Smith, January 22nd, 1949. Also, there are some exceptions to this rule, as we can see in this quote by Khrushchev. Let's read it. The system under which some states sell arms to others is not our invention. France, Britain, and the United States have long since been supplying arms to very many countries, and particularly to the countries whose governments take the most hostile attitude towards the Soviet Union. Therefore, we have nothing else to do but to act in the same way. We sell arms to countries which ask us to do so and want to be friendly with us. Apparently, they buy arms because they fear the countries which you supply with arms. Thus, we are doing only the same thing which you have been doing for a long time. If the Western powers want to come to agreement on this score, we are willing to do so. We said this as far back as 1955,
1955 in London and made a statement to this effect. The Soviet Union is prepared to reach agreement that no country should sell its arms to any other country. If the countries of NATO, CENTO, and SEATO affiliated to the Western Bloc are prepared to conclude such an agreement, we shall welcome it. Nikita Khrushchev to Paris Chamber of Commerce, March 25, 1960. Now arises the question, were Khrushchev and Brezhnev revolutionaries or reformists? I think that the answer is quite obvious already. Our enemies like to depict us Leninists as advocates of violence always and everywhere. True, we recognize the need for the revolutionary transformation of capitalist society into socialist society. It is this that distinguishes the revolutionary Marxists from the reformists, the opportunists. There is no doubt that in a number of capitalist countries, the violent overthrow of the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie and the sharp aggravation of class struggle connected with this are inevitable. But the forms of social revolution vary. It is not true that we regard violence and civil war as the only way to remake society. It will be recalled that in the conditions that arose in April 19, Lenin granted the possibility that the Russian Revolution might develop peacefully. Leninism teaches us that the ruling classes will not surrender their power voluntarily. And the greater or lesser degree of intensity which the struggle may assume, the use or the non-use of violence in the transition to socialism, depends on the resistance of the exploiters, on whether the exploiting class itself resorts to violence, rather than on the proletariat. In this connection, the question arises of whether it is possible to go over to socialism by using parliamentary means. No such course was open to the Russian Bolsheviks. Since then, however, the historical situation has undergone radical changes, which make possible a new approach to the question. The forces of socialism and democracy have grown immeasurably throughout the world, and capitalism has become much weaker. In these circumstances, the working class, relying around itself the working peasantry, the intelligentsia, all patriotic forces, and resolutely repulsing the opportunist elements who are incapable of giving up the policy of compromise with the capitalists and landlords, is in a position to defeat the reactionary forces opposed to the interests of the people, to capture a stable majority in parliament and transform the latter from an organ of bourgeois democracy into a genuine instrument of the people's will. In the countries where capitalism is still strong and has a huge military and police apparatus at its disposal, the reactionary forces will of course inevitably offer serious resistance. There, the transition to socialism will be attended by a sharp class revolutionary struggle. Whatever the form of transition to socialism, the decisive and indispensable factor is the political leadership of the working class headed by its vanguard. Without this, there can be no transition to socialism. Nikita Khrushchev, the 20th Congress of the CPSU. Basically, Khrushchev says that he supports revolution and violence and stuff, but he also recognizes the possibility of achieving socialism through parliamentary means, especially in Western Europe. And so did Marx, Engels, and Stalin in Britain. And of course, Brezhnev had the same view as Khrushchev. Anyway, let's, what is it called? Quote Marx and Engels and Stalin. Marx led to the conclusion that, at least in Europe, England is the only country where the inevitable social revolution might be effected entirely by peaceful and legal means. He certainly never forgot to add that he hardly expected the English ruling classes to submit, without a pro-slavery rebellion, to this peaceful and legal revolution. Engels' Preface to Capital, Volume 1. The objective in the case under consideration is the emancipation of the working class and the revolution, transformation of society implicit therein. An historical development can remain peaceful only for so long as its progress is not forcibly obstructed by those wielding social power at this time. If in England, for instance, or the United States, the working class were to gain a majority in Parliament or Congress, they could, by lawful means, rid themselves of such laws and institutions as impeded their development, though they could only do insofar as society had reached a sufficiently mature development. However, the peaceful movement might be transformed into a forcible one by resistance on the part of those interested in restoring the former state of affairs, if, as in American Civil War and French Revolution, they are put down by force. It is as rebels against lawful force. Marx, the parliamentary debate on the anti-socialist law. The draft of the program correctly puts forward the task of utilizing the traditional English institutions, Parliament, in the struggle for socialism. It is well known that the English communists are being accused that they will establish Soviet power in England. Hence, it is imperative that in the draft of the program it should be very clearly indefinitely stated that the English communists are not going to delegitimize Parliament, that England shall come to socialism through its own path and not through Soviet power, but through people's democracy that would be guided by people's power and not by capitals. Joseph Stalin letter to a CPGB leader Harry Pollitt on the draft of the party's British Road to Socialism. September 28th, 1950. Basically, Marx and Engels believe that a peaceful path to socialism is possible if society has reached sufficiently mature development, such as in Britain, while Stalin believed that the peaceful path to socialism through parliamentary means is necessary in Britain. So Khrushchev and Brezhnev weren't revisionists for believing that it might be possible that socialism may be achieved through parliamentary means in Western Europe. As for Khrushchev and Brezhnev telling a very small amount of countries not to revolt in Africa, they believe that them winning is unlikely and believe that guerrilla warfare doesn't work in Africa, which is true as we saw in practice. In conclusion, Stalin invented peaceful coexistence as Khrushchev and Brezhnev defined it. Peaceful coexistence opposes interference in countries' internal affairs, as this harms self-determination. But if the US does it, then the USSR will do the same. Peaceful coexistence also supports trade in exchange between the socialists and the capitalist world, and still encourages revolutions. However, since Marx and Engels, Marxists always thought that in some cases the peaceful path to socialism is possible. Special thanks to Ismail for helping me with quotes on the path to socialism. He has a thread which I'll link in the description. The sources are in the description as well. Bye.